And you say in the book that the US will become less anxious when it realizes that China is an expansionist. You've also mentioned how in the Chinese thinking is that they build walls to protect themselves. But on the other hand, over the years, we've seen how China has extended its reach, to other countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. And currently, there are some of these developing countries which have failed to meet their debt obligations and are in some trouble. And we've also seen China's actions and rhetoric on the South China Sea, as you've mentioned. Do you think that we may be a bit too sanguine about China's geostrategic ambitions in the world?
No, I think we have to take it one strand at a time and not put them all together in one basket and then draw an easy conclusion. If you're talking about the Belt and Road, that I think is win-win for everybody. Because if I build a road from China to you, then there can be more trade. Both sides will benefit. So China's Belt and Road is a natural outcome of the growth of its economy and its spillage beyond China. This has always been, in all Chinese dynasties, it's always been the biggest internal market in the world, and it created huge opportunities for its neighbors. So the Belt and Road is a facilitation of that process. It provides an opportunity for countries to coordinate their master plans so that when they build roads and bridges, they meet and connect. To me, it is obviously beneficial to everybody, provided the Belt and Road is not all converging on China and not leading to a network of transportation and communication lines throughout Eurasia, which I think it will be. So you may build a road from China to Astana, but Astana may build roads to Tashkent, to Moscow, to other places. So in the end, you have a web. And the Belt and Road should not only serve China and its neighbors, it should serve these neighbors among themselves. And if the Japanese and Europeans and Americans want to add to the network, that's all to the good. So if they feel that China is having an unfair advantage and they want to also do their bit, we should welcome it. When I was trade minister, I used to make this comment that let China build all the north-south links, let Japan build the east-west links, then we have a nice grid. And that's the way we should play it, and I believe that's the way countries on the Belt and Road will play it. That as the account with China grows, naturally they want diversification. Naturally they want the Americans, the Japanese, and others to also be part of it. What is uncomfortable is when the US or Europe tell these countries, you choose China or you choose me. And that doesn't make sense for those countries. Surely they want connections to both. So that's one strand of the Belt and Road that you raised, which I don't think is negative at all on China. Then you talk about the debt trap. That is repeatedly a point raised by Western media that somehow China wants to lose money and therefore to foreclose their loans and commandeer their assets. I don't believe China wants that at all. These are Chinese state-owned enterprises. They have their own KPIs. They want to make money. They don't want to lose money. And sometimes in enthusiasm, they may make wrong choices. They may be involved in quick decisions, sometimes corrupt on the side, and then they lose money. And I believe they regret it. They don't want to lose money. So this debt threat, to me, is not very credible. They talk about Sri Lanka, and the Chinese have got a 99-year lease on Hambantota or something. Can China walk away with Hambantota port? No. In any case, China's total debt in Sri Lanka's total debt is only 10%. So most of Sri Lanka's financial problems are not due to China, but China gets 90% of the blame. And I think it's something that we should remember, that it is not in China's interest to create debt threats. Sometimes it does happen when countries are irresponsible, in which case it's the people themselves and the leaders who are principally responsible. But I think we should remember that for many of these countries, the principal creditors are Western countries and Western banks, not China. Then you raise the other issue of whether China will become expansionist. You talk about the 9-dash line in the South China Sea. I think here history is important. When the Western powers arrived in this part of the world, and the French were expanding their influence up Indochina in the South China Sea, the Qing dynasty, at every step, recorded its objection. it was weak then and could not do very much about it, but it never allowed it to pass without protest. So when the KMT took over, they inherited those claims and formalized them, I think in the 30s. And then finally, after the war in 1947, they actually put out a map showing the 11 dash lines. 11 dash line. And at that time, I don't believe any of the Western powers objected, Now, the claims of Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei are inherited claims from the colonial powers. So it's not as if China made those claims recently. These countries, I'm referring to the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, they base their claims, their maritime claims, not on territorial ownership, but on UNCLOS, which is that if you have these territories, then these are the claims you're entitled to. But China made territorial claims way ahead. In the case of Vietnam, in 1958 and 1974, Pham Van Dong explicitly said that those islands belong to China. But that was not Vietnam. In 1975, when they took over the South, they said they rescinded those statements that they will make under duress of war. Now, how much this will hold in the court of law, I'm not so sure, because duress of war is if you acted under coercion. China was an ally, not the enemy. But anyhow, anyone looking at the map will feel that China's 9 dash line is egregious, that it comes almost to the horizon. So naturally, countries like the Philippines, Brunei, and Malaysia, they say, how can that be? Just because we were not born as independent countries at that time doesn't mean that you have all these rights, which you claim to be from the past. I think in the end, China will have to negotiate on boundaries and on maritime rights. The point I'm making is China's claims are not without legal basis. They are not weak. And we should not lightly dismiss them as an act of Chinese aggression. In fact, in the Tonkin Gulf, between North Vietnam and China, I believe in the early 50s, they rubbed off 2 dashes and settled the delineation. And the Chinese were generous. Ho Chi Minh actually wrote a letter to Mao Zedong to thank him for China's generosity. And I hope eventually, when there are good relations, more dashes can be rubbed out and boundary delineation properly made in the sea.